Hey, I'm Matt, and this is No Dumb Questions, and today we're going to do something fun and different from anything else that we've done in any of our previous episodes. We're calling this a Grabbler episode. Destin Sandlin, would you like to explain how we arrived at that horrible name?
I would love to. So we thought about calling it like a grab bag episode because the basic premise is we like to go really deep into a topic and just explore everything we possibly can about that, even if it takes an hour and a half. However, there are these other topics that we also want to talk about that we might not have that much content about, but we still want to talk about it. So this is kind of like a grab bag where we each pick some topics and throw them in a bag and pull them out of the hat. However, you have a fictional character called the Grabbler that you use to terrorize your children. And
I sure do, and I'm not about to apologize for that. For whatever reason, one time we were staying out at camp with the whole family, and I sneaked up the stairs in this rickety old cottage, making like creepy camp murderer sounds, and my children were delighted by that. Your kids may be different. My kids like to be horrified.
But this character's name is the Grabbler,
The
right?
character's name is the Grabbler. I regret that, but at this point it's locked in, and the kids beg to be grabbled every night, which amounts to me creepily sneaking into their room and tickling them until they cry and beg me to stop.
So we do something similar. I tickle the kids, and they each have a series of code words that they have to say in the correct order in order for me to stop tickling. And so, like, for instance, one of the child's code words are Uncle Mercy Calf Rope.
I think that activates the Winter Soldier.
No, but they have to say their 3 words in the correct order that particular day in order for me to stop. And obviously, it's the last permutation of the words, obviously. One of my children has a hard time with the letter L, saying the letter L or the letter R. And so, naturally, his words are lollipop, wet willy, rainbows. And so,
Cruel.
he has to get it right in order for me to stop. And it's my way of, helping him practice those letters and at the same time, getting to have some daddy tickle time. It's fun stuff.
You're helping me save face by acknowledging you torture your children, too. We have universal safe words in our family anytime the tickling or anything is getting to be too much. And the safe word we all use is, no matter how much I scream, keep doing that. Don't stop. You have to say exactly that. And then I know, oh, wait a minute. That's the safe word. And then I stop tickling.
Are you being serious right now?
No, that would be the worst safe word ever. So we have agreed to the following. We each are going to pick 3 topics. And for each of us, 2 of those topics are going to be whatever we find interesting from the world or the internet or science or history or whatever. Then the 3rd one is going to specifically be drawn from a listener question, and we'll engage with that. So 6 total. We'll take a little chunk of time on each and see where we get.
Sweet. Let's do it. Who's up first?
You introduced the episode. I think you get to go first.
Grabbler. I'm going to talk about something called Dazzle Camouflage. Have you heard about Dazzle Camouflage?
I know nothing about Dazzle Camouflage, but it sounds fabulous.
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm going to need you to go to Wikipedia right now and just look up Dazzle Camouflage. This is fascinating. So one of my secret loves is researching naval weaponry technology. In 4th grade, I wrote a report. It was one of the very first reports I ever wrote about the advancements of naval technology during the Civil War and how the artificial pressure of survival due to war created these huge leaps in technology. Well, one of the things that fell out of all this, research in World War I is this concept called Dazzle Camouflage. Now, if you were, let's say, a German U-boat periscope person, the way you would figure out how far away the enemy was or the merchant ship you were trying to sink is with depth perception, okay?
Sure.
So if you think about your vision and how it works, why do you think you have 2 eyes?
I assume it's just to be symmetrical and handsome so I can seduce a mate.
No, think about it. How does depth perception work?
Well, I'm guessing you're going to tell me it's with 2 eyes. I suppose depth perception is different as I sit here and cover one, but I don't get it.
Okay, so think about this. If you have something that's really close to you, like your thumb, if you put your thumb like 2 feet in front of your face and you do the blinky thing where you blink back and forth,
it moves.
You'll see that it's at different places in your vision. And if you hold your thumb at arm's length, it changes. So your brain is constantly doing trigonometry to figure out how far away something is. If you can draw a triangle between your eyes and the object, and then your brain is measuring that angle, you can get depth. Well, back during the battleship days, which I'm hoping you can bring up some battleship stuff here in a second, the cool thing about the way they did it is they made 2 artificial eyes. They would put 2 vision systems really far away, and one of them would see the top of the boat, and the other one would see the bottom of the boat. And then they would crank this little wheel and line up those 2 images for the top and the bottom of the boat. And at that point where they lined up, you could just read a number off of it, and you could tell how far away the boat was.
Really?
Does that make sense? Yeah, it's awesome because it's this neat crossover between history and physics and optics and math. It's really, really neat. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it's called a naval rangefinder.
Do you know how long that's been in use?
I know they used it during World War I, but I don't know if it goes beyond that because, artillery back in the day, you had to try to find distances before lasers, and I don't know how they did that.
Well, I think part of the way you found distances was keep shooting. I mean, in the old school naval combat, I'm not sure there was a good way to estimate that other than you just had somebody smart who'd shot a lot and you made slight tweaks.
Yeah, it's really interesting, but this, if you're making camouflage for a boat, let's say you're in, 1910 and you have a big boat that you want to hide. What color do you paint it if you're on the open sea?
Oh, blue.
Yeah?
I don't know. Like it seems like blue. But the problem is, how do you hide a boat? Because everything is flat and that thing's going to stick up and be really obvious.
Right.
The silhouette of a human is the most obvious, noticeable thing. And so a lot of camouflage, like a ghillie suit, that's what it's called, right? For snipers wear. Yep. That's meant to just disrupt the lines of a person as much as anything, isn't it?
It is.
So you can't really disrupt lines with paint in the middle of an ocean. Those lines are going to be evident.
Well, so this is the trick that Dazzle Camouflage would use. So not only do you have to determine how far away something is using that trig with, these things called coincidence rangefinders, but you also had to estimate the direction that it was traveling and the speed that it was traveling. So the cool thing about Dazzle Camouflage is it was so weird. It basically makes the ship look like a zebra, but the zebra is like tripping acid. And so you can't tell which direction the stripes are laying and all that good stuff. So your coincidence rangefinders don't work very well because it's hard for you to line up these lines. And, conversely, you can't figure out which way the boat is pointing, especially if he's using like naval tactics, like tacking back and forth on this way to you. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm looking at a picture of it here on the Wikipedias, and the angles of the black and white stripes, they run opposite of what would be intuitive in terms of making it look sleek and cool.
Right.
I don't know how to describe it, but it messes with my eyes just looking at it because it seems backwards.
Exactly. So you can't tell, because of the Dazzle Camouflage, you can't tell where like the bow of the boat is.
Right.
Because there's multiple, high contrast lines. Anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up was Dazzle Camouflage. The interesting thing about it is when they first started doing it, they didn't really know why it worked, but they were pretty sure it did. And they said, forget it, paint all the boats this way. And so the cool thing about it is they got artists involved in the war effort. They got like designers and architects to actually use their art, abilities to make crazy looking geometric patterns and shapes.
And you say this is something that the UK did first?
Yeah, they started it, and then the US jumped on board quickly thereafter.
The UK has been pretty good and innovative at Navy, even before they were called the UK.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's just their reputation. I mean, was it 1588? I'm pretty sure that's right. 1588's when they defeated the Spanish Armada. Yeah,
was it Horatio Nelson that did that?
No, Horatio Nelson was later at, I want to say, the Battle of Trafalgar.
Trafalgar.
If I was British, I would be embarrassing myself right now because that's the kind of thing that we know, like George Washington. But yeah, I think that's later. I think they won because the Spanish galleons were just big, fat, wide open targets. And I think the English had boats that were more like what the privateers used, the little stuff. I could be completely wrong on all of this, but that's what I seem to remember. I also have the internet in front of me, so I could just look that up.
It's not as fun. That's not how the Grabbler works.
Okay, yeah. No.
So the cool thing about the coincidence rangefinder is that it basically takes the human eyes and spreads them apart. So you get superhuman depth perception. And not only that, it gives you an ability to quantify your depth perception.
So
it's really cool.
Okay, any advancement like this, though, there's a reason boats aren't painted this way anymore. What did we figure out to get around it?
I'm assuming it's radar. Radar solved a lot of problems.
But it's embarrassing that I don't know this off the top of my head, but there's technology that disrupts radar too, right?
Yeah, you can do several things. You can make decoys, which is probably one of the more effective things. Chaff, basically it just makes a cloud that your radar can't see through, or similar things to that. And then, there is stealth technology, but it only works at certain frequencies of radar.
You know how they used to do it?
No.
How they used to fight at sea before they came up with guns?
No.
It's pretty cool. Way back in the day in classical warfare, they would have naval battles. If you think about it, you can't shoot anything. So how do you do it? Well, the way it worked, and maybe the most famous example of this is the Battle of Salamis, which is what followed, the whole 300 story with Sparta and the Xerxes and the Persians. Okay, well, that whole campaign by the Persians in the 400s BC got settled at a naval battle outside of Athens. And the way they fought was they had boats that had, were pretty flat, and they had battering rams on the front. And you would try to outposition your opponents through coordinated rowing.
To just go straight through the middle of the other boat?
You just ram them. If you get hit in the side, you're getting wrecked. But if you hit them in the side, your boat can handle it. So the whole ramming speed thing is, probably derivative of that. And so, the guy who led that battle, his name was Themistocles, is, credited with outmaneuvering the Persians, and poor Xerxes had to, according to legend, sit on the hill and watch his giant fleet get defeated at sea because they got lured into a naval battle they couldn't handle.
Was he against the, what was the other captain's name? Testicles?
Yes, I think. Destin, do you have anything else you want to say about Dazzle Camouflage in your last 4 seconds?
It's cool, and I like it. I want to say a couple things about Audible before we do the ad. And I also want to make it clear, every time we do an ad, we are legitimately trying to get you to support the sponsor. And so this is kind of separate from the rest of the show, which we're just telling you thoughts and feelings. But we are trying to get you to support the sponsor here. But I want to explain Smarter Every Day's relationship with Audible. Are you cool with that for a second?
Yeah, I am. But one other note, we're also trying to have fun with the ad part too. We're not going to write a script and just read it, are we?
No, never. Let's just say we're never going to do that.
Thank you. I like that better.
Okay, it's like this. A few years ago, I was furloughed at work.
Which is code for released for temporary incompetence?
Yes, exactly. No, every Friday I was sent home without pay due to some government stuff. But anyway, so that was kind of scary for me because I couldn't provide for the family. Anyway, Audible asked if they could sponsor Smarter Every Day, which had never been done before, and I was really scared about it. So I said yes, because I like Audible. Long story short, they've been really loyal to Smarter Every Day throughout the years. And conversely, I've been very loyal to them because I actually listen to audiobooks.
You dropped their name for fun when you were talking with the President of America.
I did. I know. I'm a loyal kind of guy. But here's the deal. What are we going to talk about today? The book that I got you hooked on Audible with, right?
Yep. Yeah, this is what I used my Smarter Every Day free trial on. I was keeping it in my hip pocket. And you'd recommended a few that sounded really good, but this one caught my attention. So the book is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. And wow, I got hooked pages in.
Yeah, this is. I don't want to give away too much about the book, but what I do want to tell people is that I'm very excited that, on Smarter Every Day, when I talk about audible.com/smarter, I get to tell people, hey, this is a book that has really affected me. But what's really cool is they have reached out and said, we want to sponsor No Dumb Questions because we like the stuff that you guys do. And so what I'm really excited about is you and I get to talk about the content. So now it's going to be audible.com/No Dumb Questions. People can get a free trial. And we are going to talk about Ready Player One in a future episode. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we're straight up asking you to go use that free trial, get Ready Player One, read/listen. I don't even know. I never know what verb to use there. Ingest the entire thing, and then you will have your homework done and you will be ready for our Ready Player One episode.
Yes. Okay. So just a little teaser, and I'm just going to give the same teaser that I gave to you, and then you can pile on if you like. Is that cool?
Yep.
Okay. So Ready Player One, it's the not too distant dystopian future where a man who's a quazillionaire dies, and it's the guy that created the Oasis, which is it's a virtual world that people go to escape reality.
That eventually sucks in everyone.
Everyone. It's like the internet, only it's, your avatar becomes more you than you are in the physical world almost. It's amazing. Anyway, so he dies, and the premise is he leaves his money, and anybody who can solve the challenges that he set up that are based on video games from the 80s can get his money. And I'm scared to say too much more because I don't want to give anything away. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think I can do it without ruining it. It's narrated by Will Wheaton. So if your nerd factor is anything above a 2 or a 3, that's just going to make it better for you. It helps you just fully lean into the fact that this is full-on nerd culture. The 80s references just keep coming to music and video games and culture. From when I was a little boy, it bleeds well over into the 90s. So if you're a touch younger than me, you'll still get a ton out of it. And if you are very young and just getting into books, you're still going to like this thing because you will learn about the things that your parents did for fun when they were kids. And you'll be able to mess with their brains as you throw out these references you're going to pick up. What I loved about the book the most, though, was it's inventive. I have been dying for original storytelling. Movies are just killing me these days. Same lame plot again and again, the same typical characters. This is so beyond the pale and so different and so fun. It captured my imagination like Star Wars did when I was a kid. I'm very excited to talk about this with you. And you and I have been holding back on this conversation for what, a year, waiting to do this podcast episode?
That's right.
We still never talked about it.
We have not. And so this is Ready Player One. We really want you to listen to it. Please get a free trial at audible.com/nodumbquestions. Download Ready Player One by Ernest Cline.
Okay, my turn. Destin, have you seen Logan?
Yeah, I have.
Are you a superhero movie guy?
Actually, yes. When my wife's in labor, I say it like it happens every week, but every time she's been in labor, we always take a superhero movie with us to the hospital and watch it together.
How did that tradition evolve?
We watched Iron Man when the first one was 36 hours of labor. We had time.
Ooh, yeah, for a few viewings and the outtakes. Do you like superhero movies? I mean, are they fun for you, or are they getting kind of played out and old?
Yeah, I like them. I like fantasy and make believe and fiction. Yeah, I enjoy it. It's good storytelling.
Okay, before I go any further with this Logan discussion, I think we need to give the spoiler warning. So if you want to skip the next 10 minutes until you've watched it, you know how to do that. Spoilers ahead. Okay, so Logan, to me, was a pretty important movie. I think it was a big deal. I think there's a reason that it got the great reviews that it got. I am getting kind of tired of superhero movies. I just feel like they do the same thing again and again. Oh, look, somebody got their powers. Then they got revenge on a bully who was mean to them and underestimated them. And they got the girl. And also there was a blue laser. They got shot into the sky, but they had to fight the source of it. And they were very courageous because of their powers. I mean, their courage.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Then everything's fine. And then you get, post-credit scene. And it all has to fit into some bigger universe. And in my opinion, the X-Men universe is terrible. The
Why?
last one, X-Men Apocalypse, did you see it?
No, I did not. But why is the
Dumpster
X-Men
fire.
universe?
I'll tell you why.
is it?
Because they messed with the timeline. And I think when you do time travel stuff, you take away all the tension. We'll just travel back in time and just do it again. And they were clever, like in Days of Future Past, the way they tried to make it a thing where you could only go back once. But for me, once you start messing with the timeline and stuff, you got 8 different versions of the same character, and it's not as fun.
My eyes are darting around the room. I'm so uncomfortable right now with your level of superhero knowledge.
Oh,
Like for me, superheroes, there's like the X-Men and then there's Marvel, which is like Batman and Superman, right?
no, you got it backwards. The X-Men and the Avengers are both Marvel. They're just different teams within the Marvel universe. And so are the Defenders from Netflix, like Daredevil and all of that.
Oh, the other ones are DC.
Yeah, DC is Superman, Batman, Aquaman.
I think my brother just screamed at the podcast if he's listening because his name is literally Cape, and he spent the first 20 years of his life wearing literally a cape.
Well, if he
And
wasn't
being a
screaming at the
Batman fan.
podcast before, he is now. That's outed. So what I liked about Logan is that instead of giving us a superhero in their prime and trying to artificially create jeopardy for them, we sense that this guy is just beat up and broken down, and his character is broken down, and he's old, and he's probably going to die soon. And he's sad, and he's not likable.
What I really liked about it is Professor Xavier kept having those seizures, and he couldn't control it. Like the concept of not being able to control your superpowers and being basically having something wrong with you and you're not in control of your body. Oh, by the way, your body can do amazing things that can really harm people. I thought that was a really neat plot twist.
I thought so too. And I thought the contrast of that, where Logan couldn't even make all the claws come out quite right. Like, just, oh, hang on a second. I'm going to murder you with this, but I got to kind of pull this out. There we go. All right, let's do this thing. Thought it was an interesting contrast between how the difference in their powers. Patrick Stewart, thank you. Professor X is so ethereal. He represents the big picture, and Logan represents the really gritty, get in the mud, little picture, blue collar, normal guy kind of character.
You know, one thing that I really did not like about the movie, like at all, was that family that had the horses, the African American family.
Oh, yeah.
Well, like, why did they have to introduce their characters and then kill them all? I did not like that at all, because they were cool people.
Well, I think it comes back to what you were just talking about.
What?
It's that to have that much power and to allow your character to fall apart is really problematic. You know, Logan is still sort of torn between being a wreck and being a good guy, but he's figured out there's not a lot of benefit to being a good guy here. I have jumped into so many fights and so many bad things have happened to people I care about that I'm just going to drink the pain away and hide in the middle of the desert somewhere until I die. That seems to be his game plan. So he didn't want to go hang out with that family, but then you get, you know, the seminal line of the movie, which is where Logan barks out, you know, somebody will come along, because he sees them in trouble. And Professor X says, Logan, somebody has come along. Man, I saw that in the trailer that has that Hurt by Johnny Cash. Like, I teared up in a trailer, man.
I don't get it. What? I don't understand why this is so moving to you.
Seriously? Like,
I don't get that. What?
Because
I'm not joking.
Everything about our impulse is just to take care of self and tune it out. And especially, like, if you had that kind of power, I think you would respond more like Logan. I think you would check out from the world a little bit. You can't be hurt. You can't be killed. You know, you've lived 5 lifetimes. I think you'd just get numb to the whole thing, like, you know, Dr. Manhattan in the Watchmen did. You just check out. But instead, these superheroes are all portrayed as just being super engaged and normal with people and down to earth. They wouldn't be down to earth. They'd figure out that the stakes of what they do are a risk to people, and that people come and go, and that they don't, because they're different. And so I get Logan's motivation to say, hey, forget this. I'm just moving on. But, you know, Professor X is still trying to do this grace thing. He has this laudable but almost naive idea that he can still do something to patch up this broken, messed up world. And those two ideas are at conflict within me at times. This youthful, optimistic, man, let's try to make things better. Let's just try to help people. People like me, people not like me. Let's see what we can do. And then also this throw my hands up in disgust, man, things are a mess mentality. And so for me, I think it was emotional to see those two parts of myself being articulated by those two characters on screen.
There's also a lot of loyalty stuff in there as well. Like but once they did make the decision to attach to someone and try to help them or whatever, like for instance, Logan drugged Professor X around everywhere and tried to do everything for him because he was in it for the long haul, even if it was hard and, you know, didn't benefit and all that stuff. I thought that was pretty cool too. And what about all the face stabbing?
Yeah, let's talk about the face stabbing.
There was a lot of face skull stabbing in that movie.
Okay, but you gotta admit, if you've watched the other X-Men movies, this dude has unbreakable metal claws and he stabs people and the people are like, ow! And then they kind of slouch over because now they're dead. How can there not be blood on those claws? I felt like this was a much more accurate depiction of how razor sharp adamantium would affect human flesh. I got to tip my hat to that.
And what about the little girl, dude? She had them in her feet.
Yeah, that made for some cool ways to draw blood out of bad guys.
Yeah, it was pretty legit. I mean, I don't know. I thought it was cool. Well, the major plot hole for me was like, hey, if we make it to the Canadian border, we're safe. Because, I mean, like, people that are going all over the country to kill you, it's not like they're going to get to the imaginary geopolitical border of Canada and be like, oh, it's Canada, better not cross this line.
Curse you.
I thought
I'll
that
get
was
you
so
next
dumb.
time. Well, I mean, that's what happens. And that I agree. That was one of the real weaknesses of the show. That's what happens when you are more worried about trying to shoehorn in a popular agenda than just telling a story that makes sense with character motivations that make sense. I'm
What do you mean?
enormously sympathetic to the conversation about borders and immigration and refugees right now.
Oh, that's what they were trying to do.
That's what they were trying to do. Like it used to be that the mutants were a metaphor maybe for persecuted gays in society. Mm-hmm. And now, in this movie, the mutants are more of a metaphor for persecuted refugees in society, which can be a useful vehicle for exploring that. I just didn't feel like it was very effective in Logan.
Yeah, the writing wasn't done very well, I don't think, at the end there. I mean, it was pretty good everywhere else. I just hate that they killed that family, and I don't forgive the writers for that.
I can work with you on that. That was dark. That was hard to watch. I think the rated R superhero movie might be here to stay, though. Deadpool was a huge success and really good and really funny. This was a huge success. I hope we can still get cupcake superhero movies that are fun and bloodless, but I'm okay with doing one or two of these a year also.
If you're lucky, your Rainbow Bright movie might still come out, Matt.
I hope it gets an R rating, man. A real hard R.
Grabbler. I'm going to really shift gears here. So we've got a few pastors at my church, and there's this one pastor that doesn't really ever get up and give a sermon or anything because he works with people in this ministry called Celebrate Recovery.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it has to do with people that are addicts and stuff like that. His wife has had cancer for many, many years, and she had a double mastectomy and came back with colon cancer and all kinds of different things. And she died about 7 or 8 weeks ago, and Pastor Steve, who real cool dude.
Yep.
A really, really smart guy.
Very modest, very human.
Pretty impressive.
Yep.
So I go to church today, and I'm going to talk about church in this segment. Feel free to skip over this if you don't want to hear about that kind of stuff. But he gets up at the front this morning. He goes, hey, as you may or may not know, this pastor's wife died, and he's here to talk about something really, really near and dear to him. And here, have the stage. And he proceeded to deliver one of the most incredible messages I've ever heard in a church. And the reason is because it was so flippin' real. And it was about depression and despair. And he was 100% real about his own depression and what it's like to go through that process and what he's actually feeling emotionally at this very moment. And I wanted to ask you, as part of my Grabbler section here, you're a pastor, and it's been my perception as I've gone to different, churches over the years, or, just watched people on TV, not necessarily even in Christianity and other things, that sometimes pastors put on this air of confidence, and they have this perception, or they want you to have this perception that they've got it all together. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And to see somebody get up there and Matt, he read from his journal. He said, hey, I just want you to understand what I'm feeling right now. And I guess kind of the only way I can do that is just kind of read this journal entry to you from 2 weeks ago. And he read about what it felt like to be on a life raft in the middle of the ocean, slowly watching land drift away, being all alone and paddling as hard as you can towards the shore, but the current keeps dragging you out further, and you don't know if you'll ever see land again. It was incredible. And so it was the most refreshing thing I've ever seen, because it's like, hey, we're not going to pretend that we're all happy clappy. We're just going to be straight up real people right now, and this is where I'm at, and I'm really hurting. And I just want you to know that. and I want you to know it's okay. And these are the steps that you go through when you're in a situation like this. And he brought it all around, and he talked about God's role in that kind of situation and what that's like. But as a pastor, I just want to see what your response is to that.
My response to that is that when I watched my dad, who is a pastor, walk through a similar grief over the loss of my brother when he was a kid, is when the rubber met the road for me in terms of faith. And I watched Dad, I think if I'm to be honest, I watched him do both things. I think there were times where, you got to remember, I mean, it's the guy's job. It's what he studies. It's what he does. There were times where he just needed to talk about the Bible and counsel people and do the thing. And there were other times where he needed to do what your pastor did today, which is just be truthful about loss and suffering and hurt and the fact that this is part of the equation. And I grew up during the era of Protestant Christianity, where the movement was trying to figure out how to make popular art and music and movies. And it was a little clumsy. But one of the things that I feel like we got wrong in that era was that we tried to make it always really just peppy and happy. And like, hey, this is a thing that'll help you, like, solve problems. It's kind of a life tips and stuff.
Yeah, it's almost like the gummy berry juice. Like, hey, church and Christianity is gummy berry juice. Wow. Just take this and you'll be happy. You know what I'm talking about? Gummy bears, bears here and everywhere. High adventure that's beyond compare. They are the gummy bears. Anyway, I'm sorry, I distracted you.
Well, it's high adventure that's beyond compare. I mean, it's
this is the Grabbler. I can do whatever I want.
I was talking about this in church today. I got a really up close look at what it's like for a pastor to grieve tragedy. And you got to understand, I don't think I've ever met a person of faith more sincere than my dad. There's no game here. This isn't something he was raised with. It's something that he picked. It's something that he's thought through as a genius of a man, something that he can defend and articulate. It's produced good things in his life. And yeah, there's just no getting around it, man. Tragedy happens and people die. So I guess you can do one of two things with it as a religious person or even as a religious leader. And that is, you can gloss over it and try and keep the sheen on things, because deep down, maybe you think that acknowledging that God is real and yet bad things happen is somehow bad for your case. Or you can tell the truth and acknowledge that suffering and the hard stuff of life is part of the equation, whether you know what to do with it or not. And does anybody know what to do with it? It's supposed to be hard.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that once you really take a hard look at it, Jesus never promised anybody would be happy. You know, come follow me and be happy. Have your best life now.
No, I think specifically he said, come follow me and be homeless. Like, yeah. Oh, have you seen that Lutheran satire where they take paintings of martyrs and have them read Joel Osteen tweets about, like, God wants to bless you in every way, and it's like Peter, upside down getting crucified.
I've seen those, and it's Lutheran satire is pretty good. I like it a lot.
Last week we talked about Job here, and I like that book a lot more now than I did the week before, because I just spent a bunch of time with it last week, and that's a pretty dang honest 40 chapters of a guy wrestling with total tragedy. And then at the end, he has this encounter with God, and it's kind of jarring, but whether it's a parable or whatever, the character of God shows up, and it's more or less just like, it's hard, and I'm God, and suffering is part of the deal. And
yeah, I really like Job. When we were in school, we read a version of it called JB. I really like the three characters that show up: Eliphaz, Zophar, and Bildad. And then who was the fourth one?
Elihu.
Yeah, and he's kind of the one that just rolls up and just like starts dropping the knowledge, right?
Yeah, he's the young guy who's been listening to the whole conversation, and he comes in and says, look, I out of respect let you guys talk, but you're being insane, because their advice to Job is terrible.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I like about it. It's like, you get these people that start talking about all these things. Well, according to our religious traditions, this is blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, what?
Yeah.
And so it has
Yeah.
Yeah, it has the same feel of the Lutheran satire Joel Osteen tweet reading thing. I kind of enjoy it.
Well, what I love about those three is that I've heard all of them and I've been all of them. And the thing is, it's easy to be those guys. And they all give bad advice from different perspectives to explain Job's suffering. Well, you probably did something wrong and this is like karma. Or, they've all got their different angles, be it philosophical or religious. But you know what? As easy as it is to sit here and say those guys are idiots, when you are at a funeral home and there's somebody there who is confused and suffering and they're looking at somebody they love in a casket, you're scrambling for things to say that aren't stupid. And it's really easy to say stupid stuff in that situation. So I feel a little sympathy for them.
Oh, yeah. You have no idea what to say. So sometimes you just say nothing at all and like avoid the person and try to pretend like they're not there. And the pastor said that. He said, in this situation, you guys have been really good and you've been there. And then Steve said, one thing about this is a lot of times you don't know what to say. And so you avoid people like this. And that's why he had him come speak today. It was incredible. With my last few seconds here on the Grabbler section, I want to say that I acknowledge that we just casually glossed over the fact that you had a brother that died. And I want to reserve the right to come back to that in a later podcast.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yes. And my request on that would be that just doesn't have to be weird. That's a part of the story. I miss my brother, but I think like what Steve was saying at your church today, it's one of those things where if it has to be weird every time it comes up, then it's never going to come up. And then the only people that think about, those who have passed on are those who have been closest to him. So I just say it's fair game. There are good stories there. There's interesting stuff. Yes, we can bring it back up.
Okay, cool.
Grabbler. All right, my turn to grabble. I've got busy fingers and they have been... And those busy fingers have been trotting around the internet, finding the most interesting stuff I can. And let me tell you what I found, Destin Sandlin. I found a $10,000 3D printable tiny house company. $10,000, you get a tiny house, it prints in a day.
Give me a website right now.
Okay, I'm going to.
A 10K tiny house 3D printed in 24 hours.
Yeah, okay, so there's a YouTube video. It's down below. Apiscor, A-P-I-S, one word, C-O-R. I have no idea what that's short for, if it swears in another language, but whatever the case, they have been building these things in Russia. And it's this giant 3D printer, and the ink is this unique concrete mixture. And so they put up this tent so they can print in any temperature practically. And then you've got this 3D printing arm that telescopes back and forth and draws from this giant hopper full of concrete, and it just gradually inks this house. Now, the one I'm looking at is kind of a circly house, which makes sense because of the way the arm is set up.
Yeah,
and it's not huge, but like it's straight up livable. I mean, it's nice.
So how do they do pipes and stuff? Oh, wow, this is cool. You know what I like about it? It makes the math part of my brain happy because it has to do with like converting polar coordinates to rectangular coordinates, at least that round one.
I mean, it has to be able to do that in order to make the shapes that it's making and move up and down, right?
Yeah, it does because it's a radial arm. Yeah, you're right. Man, it's pretty cool. It looks like it's reinforced as well.
It's really satisfying to see it spool out.
My question is, how do they do pipes?
Okay, so if I'm tracking with this, they have a team on site that works with the 3D arm as it goes along. So I'm assuming that they would be putting down, whatever pipes and plumbing is going to be part of the deal from a kit that's all cut in advance, and that at certain phases in the process, they just have to jump in there and this goes here, this goes there, and then it prints around it. That's just, they didn't say that, but that's just from watching the video, what I would guess. So whatever the case, I mean, they've got the thing figured out. It's not the most attractive house I've ever seen, but for $10,000, that could change the world.
It could. It's very brutalist looking, like concrete. That's what it is. They painted this happy yellow color to try to act like it's not. That's like the first rule of brutalist architecture is don't paint the concrete, but they do it. So I say that as if I know anything about architecture at all.
I sounded incredibly smart. I was just remaining silent.
I have no idea what I'm talking about.
There's this, when you go to Rome, you go there as a tourist, you hang out in the pretty old part, and you look at the old stuff, of course, and you just marvel at this architecture that has stood the test of time. And then if you go out of Rome toward their old port of Ostia, and it's not a port anymore, it's silted in, so it's all kind of preserved in time. It's a cool spot. But on the way, if you look out the train, you will see Mussolini's Rome, fascist Rome. And it's just these concrete monuments to getting people to line up and participate in a bigger plan. I don't know what the Italian people think about Mussolini's building programs or anything from that era. I think they're hideous and dehumanizing. And if there's a downside to this, it's just what you're saying. This is certainly anything but lovely. And I think loveliness kind of does matter in architecture.
I think it does too. You kind of want to go home because it feels comfortable and pretty and stuff like that. And this doesn't feel comfortable and pretty, but it's really neat the way it's going. The question I have here is one of the major parts of building a house is the foundation, and you have to pour a footer, and they're just doing this right on top of the gravel. So it looks like they're creating this little trough with the stuff, and then they're filling it in, and that's what they're calling a footer, but it doesn't look very stable to me. You know what I mean? I don't know, man. Let's flesh this out a little bit. Would you ever live in a 3D printed home? And if so, would it look like this?
If the alternative was homelessness, I definitely live in it. I don't care if it's stylish or good for society or not. I just want shelter for my family. If I have the option to pick something, no, this wouldn't be high on my list. If they can do that, I bet they can do something cooler than that. What about you?
I think it's an interesting concept, and I would definitely do something like this for a shop, place to park a tractor, something like that.
Yeah, something easy to put up on the back lot of a property. But what about this? It takes a small crew one day to make one of these. What are the economic implications of something like that?
I don't know, man. To me, this seems like a gimmick because as I'm looking at it, I realize that the hardest part of building a building is the floors and the roof. Right? And so all they're doing is making walls stand upright. And a framing crew can frame a wall with timbers and, 2x4s in just a matter of hours. So This seems a little gimmicky. I mean, isn't there something in Rome where to build a roof a certain size, they had to develop a certain amount of engineering knowledge?
Yeah, they had to invent ways to handle larger spans.
Yeah. And so all the magic here seems to be in making a wall, which isn't that impressive. We have cinder blocks and all that good stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, but the turnaround time, 24 hours and you have a house ready to go. It seems like that would be really appealing, and 10 grand. If you're talking about some places where you live, that's a few months worth of rent.
You know what I'm doing? I'm looking on YouTube here, and I'm finding things about 3D printed homes from like 2014, 2015. And to me, this is looking like a lot of people have tried to make it work, but it's still gimmicky. It's just not happening. People aren't, for whatever reason, it's kind of like 360 video. Everybody was told that 360 video was going to be amazing, but is it amazing? Have you ever watched a 360 video and been like, oh, that's amazing? The only thing
I've ever seen that was cool with that is that Walk Off the Earth video. I don't want to see another music video like that. One was plenty.
Yeah, exactly. I saw the Swiss fighter jet team fly, and I was like, oh, neat, 360 video. Oh, I can look around the canopy, and I'm done.
Yep.
This kind of falls into the same category with me. I don't know.
So our conclusion is that 3D printed homes, as they stand now, are not the thing that will bring about the robot revolution, end human employment, and solve all of the housing problems of the world, as it stands right now.
Yes, I'm definitively making that statement. I used 3D printers this week to create parts that I couldn't create using traditional machining methods. And the reason it was so valuable is because I needed unique geometries, and it did it for me.
I wrote my sermon this week on a 3D printer. Okay, we need to talk about the 50-50 thing again. I, unlike Destin, continue to think that this is the fourth or fifth best idea in the history of the internet, and I'm not willing to give up on it. So here's the quick review. We made a game called the 50-50, where no matter what happens, you basically lose. If you lose and win, you have to sponsor us on Patreon. If you lose and lose, you have to sponsor us on Patreon and watch a horrifying video. Well, some people apparently don't like watching zebras being disemboweled by crocodiles, which is an opinion I can respect, but will never understand. So last episode, I let Destin, through his weakness, convince me that we should put 2 heartwarming, tender, nice videos on the 50-50 and let you play a game where if you win, you get a tender, heartwarming video, and if you lose, you get a tender, heartwarming video. And I think that's lame. So we're going to do a compromise version this time around of the 50-50. So episode 006 50-50 is going to work like this. If you play and win, and again, we play by going to the5050.com, you can type in anything resembling the 50-50 and it will get you there because we spent stupid amounts of money to buy every URL that could in any way be conceived of as the5050.com. So literally slam your drunken flippers on the keyboard again and again and you will eventually get to the5050.com. At which point you'll be presented with 2 buttons representing 2 different links. Pick in your brain which of those 2 links you want to click on, then use your hands to manipulate your mouse to click on one of those 2 links. If you win, you'll be redirected to a page where you will get to enjoy the Gummy Bears theme song referenced in this episode. Now, you'll be morally obligated to listen to that in its entirety before clicking on the link to go to Patreon and support us, your friends. If you lose, you'll be redirected to one of the most disappointing songs in the history of both church and the internet. Destin and I both cherish it, and we both hope you lose so that you can cherish it as well. Now, you'll be obligated to listen to all of that before clicking on the Patreon link to once again support us, your friends. Thanks so much for playing the 50-50 in advance, and thanks so much for being a part of No Dumb Questions. I'm Matt. Now back to the program. Okay, the third and final Grabbler round for each of us. The ground rules where it has to come from a patron or a question from a listener. So you are up with the listener question round.
Okay, with my section, I'm actually going to do 2, but I'll just kind of half them and, split the time between the 2. The first one is a question from patron Thomas Balsamo. He says, question, are there any unfair misconceptions that people have about your occupations? If so, what do you want people to know to help clear them up? Okay, so I would say, as an engineer, people think that we're dorky and we don't have people skills. And
yeah, you disprove that dorky thing every single day.
Yeah, thanks, man. No, I think that actually is a big misconception, and they think that engineers are just unidimensional people that like to sit around and do complex free body diagrams and calculate things. I have met a lot of engineers that have really, really interesting hobbies. A lot of climbers, a lot of people that like to go hiking and build airplanes, and there's just a lot of really cool technical stuff that people do in their off time. That's probably the biggest one, and that we're all good at math. All of us aren't good at math. There are some people that struggle with it. Yeah, I know. I don't know. When you think engineer,
can you give me a list of the engineers who are bad at math, and then the projects associated with them, so that I might avoid those things?
Bridges I cannot.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really like a math guy, but I made this here airplane.
So when you think engineer, what do you think?
Okay, I think German. I think the top button is always buttoned. I think you're not gonna want to ruin your shirt, so you're gonna want something to protect those pens.
For real. What do you think of when you think of engineer?
For the longest time, like that was the stereotype when I was a kid. That's what I pictured. Like just like people who stand in a row and write things on clipboards. At this point, I just picture people who speak a different language than me. I picture people who maybe go as far to the extreme of thinking everything about the human experience and the world is explainable through numbers and data and studies, as I maybe skew to the other side, thinking everything about the world is explainable through abstractions and conversation and personalities and philosophy.
A scientist is somebody who studies, the hard sciences, but an engineer takes it to the next level and actually applies that science to everyday life in a way that makes it real and usable. That's why engineering is so cool. It's like Batman who has a utility belt but actually uses the utility belt. You know what I mean? Engineers know the stuff and learn the stuff in school. Or actually, I'm going to take that back. Engineers don't learn all the stuff in school. They basically just learn how to learn. And then they come out of school knowing how to do things. And if they don't know how to do it, they ask the question and figure it out and apply science to it and do neat things with it. I don't know. Engineering's awesome. I really like it.
Is there a subset of engineers who all the good engineers know are bad? Like, is there a thing that if you do that, all the good engineers just roll their eyes like, oh my goodness, it's that again?
Yeah, there is. PowerPoint. The way engineers use PowerPoint can be either mind-numbing or brilliant. I mean, sometimes people will just throw a chart up there with like 50 bullets and they'll be like, oh yeah, today we're going to talk about this. And you're like, oh God, this guy's about to read me this slide. Oh, he's reading me the slide.
That's the same in every profession.
You know, and so the way I do it is sometimes I'll do a presentation with just videos or just pictures. I'll throw a picture up there and just talk about the picture. And I get people mentally engaged as much as possible. But, you know, I don't know. I'm a little bit different. A lot of people tend to do that, though. They're the coolest ones to communicate with.
Well, we're kind of in the age of stereotypes applying less. I mean, if there's one good thing that's come out of being hypersensitive about every stupid thing you could possibly be offended about, is that it does at least force us all to think a little bit in terms of, well, maybe my brush is a little too broad in how I think about this or that.
Well, what about misconceptions about preachers? Because you're a preacher, aren't you, Matt?
Well, first of all, thanks for using that term. I also would have enjoyed reverend. That's great. I did not set out to do this. This was not my intent. I like philosophy and history and theology and where those things mix. So that's that's just how you end up at a seminary. I studied all of that stuff. And so I feel like I really backed into this kind of on accident, but I really love it. You're positioned to be there when people are in tough spots or when people are asking the big questions, and you get to help a lot. And I'm a selfish jerk, but I also have a side of me that likes to help. And so I like the job way more than I thought that I would like it.
And for the record, you prefer the term pastor, right?
I don't know that I prefer any of the three. I guess that's the one I would like best. It sounds the least aggressive. But
do you have a master's of what's it called?
Yeah, I went to seminary.
MDiv?
No, I don't have an MDiv. I have an MA from
MDiv
seminary.
is Master of Divinity, right?
Yeah, an MDiv is like a 96 credit hour program. So if you meet somebody who has an MDiv, they have the equivalent of most people's doctorates. It is a massive program, and you have to learn 2 incredibly difficult languages to get it.
Greek and Hebrew.
Yeah, these are smart people. Yeah, you might not agree with everything they think. I don't agree with everything every pastor thinks, but I got to give them their props. They did their work. Well, for the most part, I guess you can be a pastor by just anybody calling you a pastor.
What do you have?
I have 2 master's degrees.
In what?
My first MA is in systematic theology and church history. And my second MA is in history of the American West, history of Western thought. They're all kind of vague. History, ideas, theology, that kind of stuff. But here's my thing. The one that always gets me is this. If I'm on a plane and I'm talking with someone and we're having a normal conversation, because this apparently is the only place where it's still somewhat socially acceptable to just talk with someone without meeting them on an app first. If I'm sitting on a plane with them and we're talking and it's all good and everything, and we're just being normal with each other, we eventually get around to the what do you do for a living? And when I say what I do, I get the same 2 things every time. Do you want to guess what they are?
No.
Okay, I always get...
Because I just feel uncomfortable even thinking about what that's like.
Terrible, man.
Did they like start telling you awesome stuff and like, cussing a lot?
Yes.
Being real buddy, and then all of a sudden they clam up?
Yes, and their ideas are different than mine, and it's interesting, and it's good, and I'm like, they're helping me grow as a human, and I'm learning about them, and we're having a blast, and they're using normal person language, and so am I hope. But then inevitably, so what do you do? I am a minister. Oh, yeah, I haven't been to church. Sorry, man. Why on earth would you apologize to me for anything? Like, I just met you on a plane and you're nice. It's fine. You do whatever you need to do, dude. We already covered that I'm a libertarian. Go crazy. And then I always get the, yeah, sorry about the language. Sometimes that gets the best of me, Pastor. I am Matt. We have already covered this. You know my name, dude. I'm not calling you contractor as soon as I find out what you do. Like, it's cool.
I guess that is interesting because, people aren't like, oh, an engineer, please, could you solve this equation for me? I've been really wondering about the pitch on my house roof. House roof?
It's more like feeling guilty that they haven't figured out the pitch on their roof. Oh, I'm sorry, engineer. I keep meaning to figure out the pitch on my roof. And, I just haven't had my calculator out for a long time. I need to get back to that. It's weird.
Okay, here's the next question from Patreon. This is from Josiah Michael. If the salary you make from your job was just given to you by someone without having to work, what would you do with the extra time you now have? Also, Matt, you should post stuff on Snapchat. I think you would be good at it.
Thank you. Thank you, Josiah Michael. I do post things on Snapchat sometimes. Whenever I travel, I do a lot, but I forget. Today I posted...
What's your Snapchat handle?
Today I posted a picture of elk from my front yard.
Matt, what's your Snapchat handle?
Worst Christian.
That makes perfect sense.
Yes, it does. Pretty proud of that.
All right. So back to the question. If your salary you make from your job was just given to you by someone without having to work, what would you do with the extra time?
You go first.
I don't feel like I work for money. I work because I really like doing what I do. You know what I mean?
Thanks a lot for stealing my answer. Yeah, proceed.
Yeah, I mean, I really like doing what I do. And if they were like, hey, you don't have to do this anymore, I'd be like, well, can I? Because I like shooting stuff and I like doing all this math and figuring out these super complex things that are really hard to figure out. It's very challenging to me. And it feels like it plugs a little hole up in my mental brain space.
My answer is the same because I like all the stuff I just said a minute ago. I really like what I do. And when I was doing the academic thing, I would prepare all these fancy lectures and stuff about things that happened a long time ago. And my students were all really cool. I had a ton of great students. But if you publish something or go to a seminar or, talk about your content that you're into, like 8 people listen. Nobody cares. Here, like every week, I get to do original research on history and ideas and stuff, and things that affect life. And I get to go and process it with a whole bunch of people I really care about. And so it's fun to have this weekly rhythm of having to think and research and produce original work and then share it with people I like. So I don't think I would change much. I love where I live. I really like where I go to church. I really like what I get to do. So yeah, I don't know. We both said the same thing. Is that lame?
No, I don't think so. It's real. That's how the Grabbler works. We just do things and whatever.
Is the Grabbler well enough established that it has ground rules?
I don't think so.
Good.
It's fun to pretend like it is.
That's important. Grabbler. Okay, my turn for the final Grabbler round. That was fun, but it was a lot of talking about stuff we do and things like that. This one has nothing to do with us, and I am eager to get off the subject of us for a minute. So here's a question that we got on the subreddit. If a conjoined twin murders someone, how would the law deal with this?
I actually remember this because it was one of the original things on the subreddit before we
stopped taking questions on the subreddit. I think it's a really fun question, and I've actually been thinking about this a little bit, but let's get your knee-jerk reaction. Conjoined twin murders someone. We assume the other twin didn't feel like it and even tried to push back on this. What do you do with it?
Well, I think it's a lot like a conjoined twin getting married.
Well, what do you do with that?
How is this different? There are conjoined twins who have been married to not conjoined twins. There's a lot of things that happen when you're married. But how can someone commit murder as a conjoined twin if somebody else wasn't involved, at least in some way? How could that even happen?
Well, okay, let's just game it out. Let's say you and I are duct taped to each other and you get really mad at somebody and want to have a fist fight. What am I supposed to do about that?
I don't know.
You are still an actor in the world. You have agency, whether you have a body with 4 limbs like you generally think of, or whether you have a body that works differently. And you're responsible for that agency and what you do in the world around you, right?
I'm continuously solving problems like this amongst my children.
How so?
It's like, well, he made me do it. Really? He made you do that. Please explain how he made you do that. Well, he asked me to really, so you got to choose. So he didn't make you do it. That kind of thing. Anyway, we digress. I think if a conjoined twin murdered someone and the other twin did not want to do it, I think by law, aren't you required to report it within 24 to 48 hours if you're aware of a crime being committed?
I assume murder is a mandatory report kind of thing.
I'm looking it up right now.
I feel like it would be pretty unethical, at the very least, not to report a murder you witnessed.
Penalties for failure to report and false reporting of child abuse. And I can only assume that this would extend to things like murder.
Since murder is worse, yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, child abuse is pretty high up there on my list. I don't know. I think that once you don't report, then you're at fault. So let's go ahead and assume that the other dissenting party decided to report the conjoining twin for murder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what happens.
Well, okay, but even in that scenario, like let's say one was dissenting and didn't report, and the other actually murdered somebody, which is an absurd scenario, but this gets somewhere important, I think. Those are not the same crime. It's not nearly the same level of crime to not report a murder as it is to kill someone, right?
Yep.
So the punishment still wouldn't be equal, and that gets really to the heart of the question, which is what's more important, to punish the guilty or to not punish unjustly the innocent? What's the greater value?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I just don't think it can happen. I think this is one of those things that it's impossible for this to happen.
False, Destin Sandlin, because I have internet, and using internet, I found a book called Conjoined Twins, an Historical, Biological, and Ethical Issues Encyclopedia by Christine Quigley, available on Google Books, which I found and went through as an ebook and discovered that in 17th century Paris, a conjoined twin stabbed someone else, possibly murdered them, and ultimately was acquitted because the French were unwilling to punish the innocent twin for the guilt of the guilty twin.
Are you serious?
I am dead serious. This happened.
Point me to the link.
It's kind of complicated here. All right, let me see what I
France
can
or
do.
Italy?
France is what I have here. It's tough because it's in a big, giant ebook. I don't want you to have to wade through it all.
I found a link that says something in Italy happened in the 17th century. No way, man. Half guilty. How would the American legal system punish conjoined twins if one committed murder? Oh, wow. I'm on a law website. Oh, my goodness. To consider more extreme approaches to punish the guilty twin, the court could order the twins separated so that the guilty twin may be punished.
Okay, I heard that proposal, but the problem is if even the slightest bit of that shared flesh belongs to you,
or vital organ,
it is none of the government's business. You see what I'm saying? Like the government just has no claim on a human body. It doesn't own me. So
on an innocent human body, because you can, the government, I mean, the death penalty is a thing, so the government can incapacitate you.
Yeah, it can. I'm not sure the death penalty is just. We might disagree on this point. We can get into that another time. But I do agree in principle that society, not even necessarily government, but society has the right to stop you from doing tangibly harmful things to other people. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So if you're messing with their stuff or you're actually tangibly hurting them, the rest of us can step in and say, oh, no, you don't. And we'll use force if we have to stop you or to punish you as a deterrent and, for future actions like that.
So the freedom of the other twin is just collateral damage at that point.
And it can't be. How can you have a free and just society if you're allowed to do things to people and claim ownership of their body, for the greater good for punishing other crimes? And that's why I think I like this question, because it gets us into something a little bit more complex here, which is how much ownership does society have over somebody else's body who didn't do anything wrong? Okay,
so let's just answer the question. You're the judge. You have to come down and you have to make the judgment. There is no cop-outs here. What do you do, Matt Whitman?
Case dismissed.
Really?
If the twins have any financial holdings I would try to offer some kind of civil award, depending on, what era this is happening in and whether that's something I'm allowed to do. But for me, the freedom of the innocent party is more important than punishing the guilty party.
Well, I'm assuming the family of the murdered victim would instantly want justice, and they would feel like you wouldn't serve it, so they would probably take it into their own hands. So you just put the innocent party in harm's way much more because they're going to get murdered as soon as they walk out of the courtroom, and you're cool with that.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, I am cool with that, not them getting murdered, but it is not the place of society as we administer justice to change the rules of justice to keep someone from maybe doing something bad.
I think you're doing that libertarian thing you do where you halfway think through something, but not all the ramifications of it.
I think you're doing that not libertarian thing you do where you bypass morality for pragmatism sometimes. And Destin, just so that you know, we're in a fight.
Oh, this is a fight?
This is a fight.
Okay.
This is going to bleed over. This is going to bleed over into the outro stuff, and it's going to be hurtful between us for a really long time because that's how we fight.
Can I go ahead and be Judge Destin for a second?
Yes, it is your turn. Fire away.
House arrest. So I'm going to go ahead and put a tracking bracelet on the ankle of the guilty party, assuming they have a separate ankle, or at least the ankle on that half of the body, just so symbolically the innocent conjoined twin feels separation from the guilt of the murder. And then they're on house arrest and they have to be monitored where they are and where they go. And so they don't have freedom per se, and that they can't just go out and about, but they can still hang out at the house and do all that kind of stuff. They're protected from the person that wants to kill them, somebody in the other family member. But at the same time, they are not free to go out and about in society and murder an additional person.
That is one solution.
That's what Judge Destin says.
Here's my problem with Judge Destin's position.
Judge Matt just killed the innocent twin.
No, Judge Matt doesn't kill anybody. Those crazy people who are hell-bent on revenge kill innocent people. What I'm saying is this, though. Like, what you're proposing is just locking someone up and taking away their freedom for something they didn't do at all. Like, that's cool. Mean. We know that's mean. Like, if you just go to your neighbor and you're like, somebody did something bad, so now you have to be under arrest because it's for your own good. Trust me. Like, you'd know that. That's messed up. That's wrong.
I agree, and that's getting dangerously close to the Japanese internment camps that the U.S. did back in World War II. I agree with that, and I have no defense for that. But in this situation, I'm assuming that's what I would probably say if I was in that situation.
Let me throw out one more option.
Yeah, go ahead.
How about incentivized exile? How about just saying, look, it's not going to work in this very unusual situation for you guys to live in Paris and for the victim family to live in Paris. So here's what we're going to do. The best thing we can come up with here is to strongly suggest that you relocate and strongly suggest that we will do our best to protect you, but ultimately we probably can't. So finding somewhere else to live would be wisest. What about just counsel from the bench that proposes a practical solution where no force is needed on an innocent party?
I'm trying to think that through. Is there a way you can do like a restraining order and, geographically isolate a person by law? Can you do that?
You mean a restraining order against the victim's family?
No, a restraining order against the murderer from entering a particular county.
Well, I don't know. We're leaving ourselves any option we want. So let's say that was possible. Yes. Then what would be your plan?
That probably makes more sense. Instead of confining and putting them in one location, you would restrict them from entering a location. I still think they're dead.
You may be right. I mean, this is a very weird scenario.
It's a fun thought experiment, though.
Oh, it's really fun. And the bottom line for me is it pushes you right to where we got. And the reason that we are in a blood feud that I don't know if we can ever resolve.
I think it's over.
Is it pushes you right to that question of which is more important, justice for the offended or justice for the innocent? And sometimes those things come into conflict, and that's a challenge.
I'm looking forward to legit lawyers and law students to tell us what the law of the land, wherever they live, would actually do in this situation. I'm looking forward to those comments in the subreddit because I really want to know.
Me too. And I'm guessing that some of those laws will make a ton of sense to us and others will make us shake our heads. I needed to clarify given the context.
I'm really glad that I'm not a conjoined twin with you.
Are you kidding me? I think we would crush it. Man,
It would be awful.
oh, it would be a disaster. Yeah, we'd both be guilty of murder.
Okay, out the door, we need to do some follow-up here on the subreddit. We talked about your freakish human skills in the last episode, and we asked people to post videos of their skills.
And that thread has been fun.
Oh, yeah. It's really, really good.
And most of them have been goofy. A lot of like weird stuff people can do like with their bodies, but the one we picked is more practical.
There was a very clear winner. It didn't have the most upvotes, but Jackalope Palin teaches you how to count in binary on your fingers. So you can count to 32 on one hand, which is amazing. I highly recommend you go watch that video. In fact, can we just leave a link to the Reddit comment that he left there?
Yeah, let's do it exactly like that.
Okay, so we'll do that, and please feel free to subscribe to the subreddit while you're there. By the way, Reddit is a place that we're doing all of our commenting. Do you want to explain Reddit? We haven't done that yet.
We need to. I've been asked a few times by people about just what the thing is that we keep talking about. So Reddit, it calls itself the front page of the internet, and it's a crowdsourced website where you can post news or pictures of cats or whatever you want, and then things get upvoted and downvoted by users, and they have some kind of algorithm where the most interesting stuff makes it onto the front page. So you can subscribe to different subreddits if you're interested in this topic or that topic. So if you're not a Reddit person, you might enjoy it. You might also be scarred for life, depending on what parts of Reddit you get to. But I promise, No Dumb Questions is not entirely scarring.
Yeah, so if you go to reddit.com/r for the subreddit /nodumbquestions, then you can see all the posts that we have that are associated with this particular podcast. Also, I think you can go to, let me try it, nodumbquestions.reddit.com, I think will also work. Yeah, that works as well, nodumbquestions.reddit.com. One other thing we should mention on the way out the door is we have a YouTube channel. The cool thing is, there's this young man that I've been working with, Trent, and he's been making the videos for these episodes on YouTube, and they're really, really good. He's got a good eye for stuff.
He's talented, man. And it's not just a good eye, he's creative.
Yeah.
We asked him to kind of just go crazy and come up with cool stuff. We can't really take credit for what's on there visually, but this guy's clever, and he's come up with really interesting ways to pass an hour and 40-minute podcast episode with something really cool visually. So go check those out.
Yeah, I think the last episode, he melted crayons in a hot plate. And then when we did the backwards talking stuff, he started playing them backwards.
So the crayons unmelt.
Yes, exactly. It's like they rise up from the wax like a phoenix.
It's so satisfying. You got to check it out. It's great. Here's the thing. We're trying to make the YouTube version of this fun. We're throwing some effort at it. We've got some good help on it. Even if you're consuming the podcast somewhere else, you might enjoy just swinging by and taking a look.
It'd be great if you subscribe to that, just so we know how many people are actually taking the time to look at that. Even if you don't use that subscription, it'd be great to have that indicator to know that it's still worth putting time, effort, and funds towards.
Yeah. Okay, we need to talk briefly about the Patreon thing, because I got a question about that similar to the question about Reddit.
Yeah.
A few folks have approached me who are listening to the podcast and like, you talk about Patreon a lot, like we know what it is. I don't know what it is. Oh, well, simply put, Patreon.com is a clever website and service where if any individual wants to micro support somebody else who is making content on the internet that they give away for free, you can do that. You just sign up to have a small donation to the program come out of your account each time we post an episode, and it's a way for us to pay our bills, take care of the people who help out with us, and a good way for you to get in touch with supporting, anybody else who you might appreciate who's making stuff on the internet. How'd I do? Is that basically the gist?
It's basically it. The cool thing about Patreon is content on the internet can be hit or miss. Like you can make content and it can either be successful or not. But if you enjoy something that somebody does, for instance, there's this guy named Patrick JMT that makes really good math tutorials. And that in itself is not a lucrative business to be in, but I think what he does has value. And so I give him $1 for every math video that he makes. And, if 2,000 people do that, that's kind of the idea of what we're doing here, where, people are helping us make this thing.
Yeah, more and better content. And the cool thing about it is that unlike a lot of other ways of funding something, this avenue to funding it's personal. You know who's helping and you feel ownership over what you're doing. So that's what Patreon's about.
It's a goodwill engine. That's what it is.
Yeah. Bye.